Okay, let's talk about the Siulim Dao and Yichikin Hunma. Hunma, Yichikin Hunma. So let's talk about the stance. So, real important is to try to find your stance, your particular stance. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. So your stance is basically the width or the length or the width of your shoulders span. So when we start, we bend our knees, we shift our pelvis forward, and we go with our toes outward and then inward like this, and our toes are inward, and then shift our pelvis forward. So then we look out onto our kneecap, in other words our patella, this patella right here. We look down on our patella, and the patella should be lined up with your toes. So if your legs are in like this, like if you have a really wide stance, you're in like this, you're going to create a lot of knee issues, okay? And so we want to strengthen our legs and our stance, right? Our knees. So if you look down upon your patella, you should see about 1 or 1.5 inches of your toes. So that's a good stance. Now the width, in other words, inside the heels, should fit like directly inside your shoulders. So your stance can be a little bit wider than your shoulders, but it shouldn't be narrower. So in other words, like this is too narrow for my shoulder span. So we want it like this. We want to shift. When we're performing our form, we definitely don't want to bounce like this. You'll see people like when they do their punches, they're bouncing like this. We want to root. So there's no bouncing. We're connecting from the heaven and the earth. So our toes, our feet are completely flat. We shift our pelvis forward, and we have 50-50 weight distribution. And we'll talk about that later, because a lot of times people will have this 50-50, but a lot of times one of their hips or their SI joint is locking a little bit. And we'll talk a little bit of how to release that SI joint so that you have even distribution. So the most important thing is starting with your feet together. Hoima means to open. Ichikin Hunma is your stance. Your patella should be lined up with your toes. Now, this particular muscle here that goes right around your kneecap is called the vastus medial. This muscle is really crucial because this helps track your patella. In other words, if your patella is tracking straight, you're going to have better knees. If the outer part of your hips and your thighs is too hard, then your kneecap will actually track backwards. In other words, it'll track to the side. So we want to make sure that we have our patella lined up to our toes, and then we perform our form when we're doing our hand movements. There's no bouncing. So if I'm punching, I'm doing Lin Won Kyun. I'm not bouncing like this, because every time I bounce, I lose the root. And remember, in fighting, straight legs equal broken legs. So try to keep your legs bent at all time, your stance. So if I shift to the side, this leg is still bent, not straight like this, okay? So again, feet together, bend the knees, Hoima, open, Yichikim Hunma. This is your stance, okay? And you want to make sure you look down on your patella, see about 1.5 inches of your feet, okay? In other words, your big toe, you can see, and everything is in line. So in other words, our feet are never inward like this, or you don't have a really big wide stance like this as well, okay? This is the neutral stance of Siulim Dao, which is from your form, Siulim Dao, the way of the little idea. All right, guys, work on that. Stop watching a lot of videos because there's a lot of garbage out there. They're teaching you wrong. And the bad part about that is that by teaching you wrong, you could be hurting or injuring yourself. You could be hurting your knees. You could create knee problems. You can create a lot of balance problems. You can create a lot of musculature problems. So the real important thing is this stance will actually strengthen your knees, strengthen your legs, strengthen your hips if it's done correctly. If it's done incorrectly, it will be counterproductive. Okay? Good job, guys. Saijian. Practice hard.